Right now we got some major supply issues bogging down the vehicle industry. So much so that it's pretty difficult to get a reasonably priced car, even if it's used. So what do you need to know before walking into a dealership? Well, today I'm getting some hardcore tips and strategies from the pastor of my church, Derrick Hurst, who actually was a successful car salesman in the industry for several years, even selling high-end muscle cars like Lamborghinis and Bentleys. So whether you're looking to upgrade or are in an emergency car situation, buckle up for the best way to buy a car today. Let's get into it.
In the 2009 range, that's when I got into car sales, when the economy was going bad and things were just kind of ugly. I started selling cars, and I loved selling cars because I never thought I actually had to sell a car. I just had to have a good conversation and try to be a trustworthy enough person. But I learned a lot in the process of trying to sell cars that helped me buy cars. And so a couple of things. One, that if I had to give you a number one thing on the process of buying a car right now in any market, is don't be desperate. If you're desperate, they can smell it. And I know that sounds awful, and I'm not trying to paint car salesmen and women in any bad light whatsoever, but think about it. These men and women, they make a living off of, well, whether or not you buy a car. And if you come in with a car that doesn't run and you're pretty much pushing it, blowing black smoke out the back, and it's on fire, they know that you're gonna buy a car. And so the first thing I can tell you is try not to seem desperate. You can love the car and all that, but do your best not to let them know how much you love the car. That would be the number one thing I could tell you. If you can tee up your sales process at all, your buying process at all, it's try to start the process of looking for a car before you need to look for a car. That would be the summary of that number one point. There are emergencies. And when those emergencies happen, understand there are a multitude of car dealerships in and around the region, and you don't have to buy from one. You can look at all of them, and you can find the one that's going to treat you right. That would be the second one, is keep your options open, if at all possible. Keep your options as open as possible so that you don't have to narrow in so tightly on a very specific car or even brand. Some people tell me that I don't have any brand loyalty when it comes to buying cars. Quite frankly, I don't. I look at cars that have longevity and safety records, but I also look at who's going to treat me right as a human when I buy a car, and who's going to work with me on price to get me to a price that works for them to make money and for me to save money. I never try to rip off the salesperson. I always want to respect them because they're in a commission-driven business. And I understand my wife is in a commission-driven business. And so I value commission-driven businesses. And I don't want to make somebody else have to make hard decisions about whether they're going to put food on the table one month or not. And so I do want them to make money, but I don't want them to make all of their money on me. And so I make sure that we're very clear when we get started that you're going to come down on price. Otherwise, we're not going to have a deal. If I can give you one more, another really cool tip that I learned is be ready to walk away. Because if you get to a point where you just don't feel comfortable, but man, you really love that car, be okay walking away. It's okay to say, I'm just not ready right now. Because if you're ready to get up and walk away and you actually leave the table, there is a really good chance that that salesperson is under a lot of pressure from their manager, and they're going to come and find you before you leave the building, or they'll call you up later and they'll offer you a different incentive or another layer of incentives. Now, I will be honest, I haven't sold cars in a market quite this tight before. And so this could be a little bit of an exception, but it still is okay to kind of push back a little bit and say, I'm not ready yet. Because they always have a little bit of something they can throw at you, a little bit of something they can help you with.
Help me understand, is it better to purchase private sale or get something from a dealership?
There are benefits and drawbacks in both directions. And I'm not going to tell you one way is better than the other. Mm-hmm. When you buy private sale, you have to really be cautious and do your due diligence looking at the vehicle. Make sure you drive the car. I would even recommend, depending on the car and the age and the miles on it, I would recommend driving it to your mechanic and having your mechanic take a look at it. Really strongly recommend that. One of the benefits of buying a car from a dealership is you are going to pay a little bit more. Mm-hmm. However, you pay a little bit more in part because they run that car through an entire service bay. And so they have trained mechanics who are going to make sure the tire depth is okay, the brakes are fine. They're going to go through and make sure the oil is in good working order. Actually, they'll change your oil for you. They're going to check a lot of the components on the car to make sure that it's sale ready. You don't get that when you buy private party. However, there's typically a significantly lower price if you're buying private party, because you don't have commissions that you're paying and you don't have dealer fees that you have to pay. And so there are some benefits and drawbacks in each direction. If you're a handy kind of a person and you can figure your way around a combustion engine and do some of those things yourself, you might risk it a little bit and kind of jump out on a limb and buy that private party. If you're not that kind of a person, you may want to jump a little bit higher in cost and go to the dealership to have a once-over done on the car, for lack of a better way of putting it. Now, are they going to catch everything? No. But I do think that you have a better chance of catching some of those big problems.
So walk me through some of the car buying process. What's a good game plan for people to have as they're actually walking into a dealership?
So some things to do before you get there. Do your research. Don't hesitate to look at, if you're locked in on a certain car, right? Let's say you really want that Honda Civic, or you really want that Ford Ranger, then look at a couple dealerships and see what those different dealerships are going to do for the exact same car. Some other things you can do is you can start to track cars on websites and see how long they've been there. And just kind of watch. Because after a certain point, and it's about 90 days, after a certain point, car dealers have to start paying to keep that car on their lot. And they get charged taxes backward for having that car on their lot so long. And so old units that are sitting on lots are really beneficial to you as a buyer. Now, you're not going to find many of those right now, because there's not a lot of older units sitting on the ground. So, one, look around and price compare between dealerships. MSRPs are MSRPs. Invoice numbers are invoice numbers. But every dealership has a little bit of extra cash they can throw at one particular unit because who knows why. It's the wrong color, the outside's great, but the inside color's not exactly selling properly, or there's just way too many of them in a market, so they'll throw extra dollars at one car versus another. And so look at those things, because you'll see those if you just start comparing between different websites. That would be the first one. The second one, know your limits. Know exactly what you're willing to pay for this car. Okay? And then the last one is the car buying process. Don't let yourself fall in love with the car so much that it takes you outside of your price point. Because that really hurts some people. And if I'll give you one last little secret, when they tell you the price of the car and how much you're going to pay for it and what your monthly payment's going to be, don't speak. This is the hardest and most awkward moment of your entire life, because they're going to do something like this, and I did this with every car that I sold, and it was never underhanded, and it's just legit what we do. You put the paper down on the table and you say, price of my car is this, the MSRP is this, the price of your trade is this number, and with this much money down, over this many months, this will be your payment at this % interest rate. If you sign right here, you can take the car home today. And then my job as a salesperson was to sit back and just wait for you to talk. And if you were to talk first, you would automatically lose. And I know that doesn't sound like it makes any sense, but in every single car deal I sold in my 3.5 years in the dealership, every time the customer spoke first, they lost. And every time I spoke first, I had to take money off the car in order to get them to buy it. It's just part of a game, and I don't even understand it, but it works every single time. So if you're able to sit quiet for just a minute and wrestle with the number, you might actually hear them say, well, what if I took $100 off? Then you've got a conversation, and that's where things get to be fun.
Okay. So in terms of the research side of preparing to purchase a vehicle, what are the top, couple things that you recommend people really keep in mind? I mean, obviously, like, safety is going to be one of them.
So keep in mind, a lot of the safety concerns are going to be similar across just about every car company. Most of those safety concerns are regulated by the government. And so they crash test these cars. Most of these car companies will actually buy their competitors' cars and crash their competitors' cars to see where they need to do better work on their crash testing. So that's one thing to keep in mind. Another thing to keep in mind is financing. You asked before about some of the ways, some of the hidden fees. I think is kind of what we alluded to.
Yeah.
There are some hidden fees that are associated with buying a car, and they come in the finance office. And all of my finance managers are going to be really upset right now because you need to know your credit score. Before you go buy a car, you need to know your credit. And you need to know what you could get in an interest rate before you go in to buy a car. Because there's a silly little thing that car dealerships can do. If they lose a lot of money in the sale of the car, in other words, if they have to drop the price of the car to get you to buy it, there's a decent chance that the rate you get in the finance office is going to be a little bit higher because they can make money on the front end of a car deal and on the back end of a car deal, right? So just know your stuff. Understand who you are. Again, finance managers make their money through commission. Commission happens sometimes by selling you product, the car protection packages, the extended warranty packages. And honestly, some of those are really worth the money that you put into it. Some of them are. If you're going to keep your car for a long time, if you have kids who are really hard on the car, some of those things are really beneficial. If you lease a car versus buying a car, getting an extended wear package on your lease is probably a pretty stellar idea if you've got kids, because it wipes away a lot of the problems you could have turning that lease back in. So those are a couple of things to look out for, some things to consider when you're looking at some of the hidden costs in the purchasing process.
Yeah. In terms of going to a dealership, but what are the taxes and fees that are non-negotiable versus the things that dealerships sometimes might tack on there just to get some extra profit margin that you can actually push them away from?
Yeah, so that's really big. So a lot of the fees are pretty much locked. You're going to have, in the state of Ohio, I think it's a $250 documentation fee. It's a fee that they can probably adjust, but that's not worth fighting. Really, I mean, in my years in car business, we never gave that up on one car deal in any of the sales we did. Then there's the licensing fees, which are state mandated, and you have to do those. Taxes are state mandated, and you do those. Those should be the only fees you really have to worry about.
Okay.
There shouldn't be a lot of extra stuff that goes on top of that. Now, what you do have is you do have a profit margin that you can negotiate on. Every car has a profit margin. Used cars have a significantly larger profit margin than new cars, and I know that doesn't sound right. If you go in to buy a new car right now, your profit margin on a new car is pretty narrow, very, very narrow. Now, there are some exceptions. If you're buying some of these, the big three, the Ford, the GMs, the Chrysler kind of cars, Chevy, all those, and Dodge, any of those vehicles have a lot of rebates that are put at them, and that buys the price of the car down. Now, Hondas, Toyotas, Volkswagens, any of those other things, I say Volkswagen because I sold Volkswagen, any of those other cars, they don't have a lot of those incentives. And so, I mean, when I sold a Volkswagen Jetta had a profit margin of $900. That's it. It was a $900 markup. And so when you sat down across the table from me and I told you that I had literally $300 to give before I didn't get commission, that's what I'm telling you. Now, everyone is going to get what's called a mini deal. Well, I can't say everybody. Most everybody gets a mini deal in the dealership. And basically that means no matter how much work they put into the sale, they're going to clear anywhere between $50 and $100 on the sale of a car. Most of the cars I sold, and most of the cars that new car salesmen sell in a non-Ford, GM, Dodge, that kind of deal, most of those, they're going to make about $100 to $125 per car. That's it.
Wow. That is so narrow. Yeah. I had no idea that it was that narrow.
Yeah, so when you go, if you're in the car sales world, you want to get out of new cars and get into used cars right now because you're going to have a much larger profit margin in used cars.
Jeez.
Right? And so you have a significantly larger profit margin in a used car. And now all of my car selling buddies, if they're watching this, they're going to be really upset with me because a lot of them like to sell used cars. So sorry, guys. But in all honesty, these car salesmen they're going to sound like they're lying to you because they say we don't have much of a markup. And honestly, if it's a new car, there's not much of a markup at all. The higher the price point of the car, the bigger the profit margin. But your standard entry-level cars that are anywhere between $16,000 and $20,000 have about an $1,100 markup in them, and that's it.
Wow.
And there's not a lot to move on that. It's definitely, right now, it's definitely a seller's market, not just with houses, but also with cars. And so here's a little tip for you right now. If you've got an extra car floating around your house, sitting in the garage, maybe you have children who went off to college who don't need that car right now, or at all for a while. Maybe your job has become fully remote and you can work from home most of the time, and you guys can go down from a 2-car house to a 1-car house. There are dealerships paying top dollar for your used car right now, and they'll buy it straight out of your hand. You drive it in, they'll pretty much pay off what you owe on it and give you a really good market value on your car in today's market. Really good market value. And you don't even have to buy a car right then.
In terms of, going to a dealership, there are a lot of people that don't consider themselves to be natural negotiators. Mm-hmm. So, would you ever recommend people bringing in a friend or a family member who is much more into the negotiating style of personality to help them with that?
That is so funny that you asked that, because I think since I've gotten out of car sales, I have been asked by probably 8 to 10 people at least.
Yeah.
In the last 10 years, I've been asked by at least 8 to 10 people, would you help me negotiate the price of my car? Like, yeah, I mean, I don't care. I'll do what I can. I can't promise anything. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, if you're fearing that you're way too passive and that you're going to get bowled over, yeah, bring somebody with you.
So then, there are going to be some people that just don't feel like dealing with the negotiation at all, Mm-hmm. But there are some places you can legitimately purchase a car online, like Carvana.
Yeah.
What do you think about those kinds of ways of purchasing a vehicle?
Yeah, so there is a place and a time for that. I'm not a huge fan. Mm-hmm. I'm not a huge fan for a few reasons. One, Carvana's gotten into some trouble, not handing over titles in a timely fashion. Actually, they had some issues with titling in general that I'm not going to get into here. There are men and women who are out there sitting in car dealerships right now who that is their sole source of income. And when we don't step foot on the lot to buy a car from those people, I'm robbing them of a chance to do what I believe they've been gifted to do. Now, some of them do it really, 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 really well, and some of them do it really, really raunchy and give salespeople a really bad name. And if you've had an experience like that, I am truly sorry. I'm not a huge fan of the car buying through a vending machine. Yeah. I'm just not. You don't get to touch the car as much. You don't get to see it. You don't get to interact with it the way you do if you're actually on the lot. And there's a lot of risks that are associated with buying online, with not being able to interact with the vehicle the way you can one on the lot.
Yeah, that's fair. Quick interruption here. If you're finding value in this video, then hit the like button. I would greatly appreciate it. And we're back to the video. You just mentioned they can make money on the front end, and then they can make money on the back end. If someone's going in to purchase with cash, how or what can they do to influence the sales so that they're not, giving up their integrity, but they're also not getting swindled, for lack of a better term, in the purchase price, I guess, just because they're purchasing with cash?
So there is no cash discount when buying a car. There just isn't. There is no such a thing. Because honestly, if you pay cash, the dealership doesn't really make any money. They're just going to make whatever is on the front end of that car deal. And so if you're going to pay cash, just be honest with your salesperson right away, and they'll structure the deal for cash. And you're going to pretty much, especially in today's market, you're going to pay an MSRP price. I do know of some car companies right now that have such low inventory that they're selling cars above MSRP on new cars, simply because it's the manufacturer's suggested retail price, and it's totally legal, and it's not wrong. It's the suggested price based on the market when the car was produced. Now, the market now, while these cars are on the lot, is significantly higher than it was when they were produced. And so you could actually run into a situation like that. But if you're a cash buyer and you're going to go in and literally pay cash for a car, be honest and tell them, hey, look, I'm looking at a cash deal, and I'm going to pay the entire thing in cash. And they're going to ask you a question. If it's a good salesperson, they're going to ask, are you paying in cash, or are you coming in with your own financing? Because they're both cash deals if you come in with your own financing. And if you legitimately are paying cash, like writing a check out of your personal checking account or a suitcase of cash, which I did sell a car to a guy with a suitcase of cash, by the way. But if you're going to do that, just be honest and tell them, I'm going to pay it in cash. And a lot of times, they're not going to treat you different, but they're going to shorten that process because they know that you don't walk into a dealership with a suitcase with X dollars in cash. You just don't do that if you're not going to spend it. And so they're not going to waste your time, and you're probably not going to get took in any other area. They may try to sell you something in the finance office with an extended warranty or paint protection or interior protection or roadside hazard protection or some kind of gap insurance of whatever kind. Any of those kind of things they can try to sell you, but by and large, you're not gonna get took on much of anything.
Okay. How do you walk into a dealership compared to someone else?
So my very first question that I ask people is, are you commission driven or are you unit driven? That's a really important question for me. Because if you're commission driven, I'm going to let you know that your commission is going to drop because I'm going to negotiate my way through this deal and the price is coming down, or I'm not leaving with your car. If you're unit driven, I guarantee you're going to sell a car to me. You just won't make a ton of money on the commission side of things. The difference between the two is commission, you make a percentage of the overall profit margin, whereas unit driven is I get a certain dollar amount per check mark on a board. So every sold car counts as a unit and you get X dollars per unit. And after so many units, you get a bonus. So yeah. That's the way I walk into a dealership. I typically walk in knowing which car I'm looking for. And I don't haggle. I tell them this is exactly what I want, plain and simple. And if you can't meet me here, that's fine, I'm leaving. And generally speaking, I have to leave just about every time, even with friends. It's kind of a hard thing to do sometimes, but I'll walk in, I'll tell them the exact price I want to pay. And if they can't meet me in that price, I walk away. Now, a good salesperson is going to try and persuade you with special financing or anything like that. You know, I got 0% financing on the truck I purchased. Well, when I said, here's the price I want to pay, he said, what if I offer you 0% financing? And my reply was, well, what if I told you that was the incentive already on the market? And so understand you have the ability to look at whatever website you're buying a car from, whether it's Ford or Chevy or any place else, and find out what their current incentives are. You'll know what their lease rates are. You'll know what their APRs are and the terms and all that. So know that before you go in. It's what I mean when I say know your percentage rate before you go to buy a car. Whether it's new or used, know what you qualify for before you go in there. Because they can't use that as an enticement if you already know you get it.
Yeah. So do you have any other tips for the viewers?
You know, there's only probably two things that I can think of. The very first thing that is probably the most important in any of this process would be hitting the like button on this video and subscribing to this so that you can get these notifications when they come available. Outside of that, I would say that you really just need to know who you are and what you're looking for before you go into the process of buying a car.
Sounds good. Thank you for helping us out with this, because this, just in this climate right now, I mean, some people legitimately are in an emergency situation where they have to purchase a vehicle like today. Yeah. You know, so hopefully this really helps out everyone who's watching. So make sure you hit the like button and subscribe button as he so eloquently suggested. All right, thanks.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you. Good luck to you.
Now, if you have questions about buying a car, I'll do my best to get an answer for you from Derrick. And if you have enough questions, we may just make another video answering them. Now, if you found value in this video, give it a like because it really helps my channel. And check out these videos right here for more ways to improve your finances today.